I've had no music lessons. I can't read music. I barely understand how to describe anything that has to do with music. However, I can write a fucking hell of a melody and I can harmonize with myself pretty decently well. And I have written some songs that I think are quite good. And I'm going to explain to you how. How am I approaching this? And for me, it's mostly instinctive. It's not something I really have to put a ton of thought into. But because I've studied what I've been doing, I've been able to then extrapolate, like, understand what I'm doing and therefore do it even better, do it to an even greater extent. So, the most important realization I've ever had about music is that the sounds can only ever go up or down in pitch. It can only ever go either do, re, or re, do. It can't go, I mean, it can go higher. It can go, do, mi, or it can go mi, do, but like it can't go somewhere other than up or down. There's only up and down for notes to go. When you go up a step, you'll feel you've gained something. When you go down a step, you'll feel you've lost something. Like yin and yang is described by, well, who the fuck was I quoting? Alan Watts. So, creating music is mostly about creating senses of loss and gain repetitively in a way that is engaging. And you can create an overall sense of loss or gain across a song through weaving a tapestry of twists and turns in the same way that any other storytelling works. This is pretty much the same way you would write like a shonen manga. It's just go up and down, and then, try to peak at a moment that fulfills the energy of the work as a whole perfectly. So with shonen, there should be up and up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, because you always want to be going higher up. And then you pretty much climax when you can't hit a higher note. There is a limit to how many. That's like the highest pitch sound I can make. There's a limit to how high you can go, contextual to whatever instrument you're using, and also human ability to hear the frequency. So, storytelling that's always meant to go up, you inevitably peak somewhere, or you plateau at a certain height and you ride that out until it's exhausting, which plenty of music does. That's what jam band music is all about. Now, if you're trying to, hit a low, again, there's only so low you can go. But you can create a sense of progression downward, if you want. Or something a lot more elaborate. Now, chords. Obviously, you can play more than one note at the same time. I'm doing it right now. Using my vocal cords. I can engage a whole lot of them at once and make some weird chord noises. Anyway, I don't know how you would describe any of those chords. When you're designing a chord, let's say it's 3 notes. If those 3 notes are all directly next to each other, it's just going to sound like a wall of sound. Bang! It's just basically one note, but one loud note. One very dense note. But if you split them up so that one of them is a little lower than the other two, it's going to sound very powerful because there's a dominating top force. And if you have 2 on the bottom, it's going to sound more pitiful because there's a dominating bottom force. And that is the difference between major and minor. And you can super complicate that. You can go crazy with how you're structuring a chord. But ultimately, the point of it is the progression of the chords. How do these chords flow into one another? Do they create a sense of gain, loss? And if you're talking about a song with 4 chords at the center of it, usually it's a very generic da 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 da. So there's always starting, dropping, peaking, bottoming, but comfortable bottoming. Because there's a level of like when you go too high, you feel like you need to come back to a natural resting place so that you can return to your original state. So if the original state is somewhere up, then the song is all about being in like a pretty up state, falling a bit, hitting a big high, calming the fuck down, going back to normal. That is the very standard 4-chord progression that almost all pop music tries to emulate. Now you could have something more like a "Since You've Been Gone" chord progression, or like that's like an even more simplified version of that idea, right? Like you start off, you have a pretty big high, and then you kind of go low for a little while, but you hit back normal, you know? So that's like it's a breakup song, so probably a relationship that started off strong but then it had a low period and now they're gone, but since you've been gone I can breathe, so now I can return back to that high point again. So like there's lots of different simple structures you can use to just create little narratives that are easily readable, that everybody can relate to through chord structures. It's just that you have to extrapolate from those like lyrics that tell a story for most people to care, because even if something sounds pleasant, it's so easy to make something that sounds pleasant that like everyone knows that. Everyone knows about 4 chords who does pop music, but they all have to find a unique angle. They have to try to tell the story a slightly different way that makes it seem like its own thing, And if you listen to like 4-chord song by Axis of Awesome, it's a great medley in that it shows you how even though these songs all have the same 4 chords, they are very different songs, like they all feel different. And so hearing them all back to back is really funny, But I recommend the live version of that if you look that up. The video version's fine, but it's not as good. There's also that one where it's like a stand-up comedian talking about how Pachelbel's canon is so ingrained into music, and he hated playing it as a, I think, viola player because they have like the simplest part in the world. But that part is also the bass line or the main guitar line of Basket Case by Green Day. So like a lot of modern music is just copying tropes that were already established centuries ago. But again, it's just about telling the familiar story in a new way. The fact that it's familiar is what makes it inviting to an audience. If your story is really unfamiliar, it's going to be off-putting to most people. And if somebody understands your off-putting story, it's probably because they are similarly off-putting. They feel similarly off-putting emotions. But whoever you're trying to reach, you have to think about what story am I trying to tell through the song. So when you start building onto a song, if you're starting with those, say a simple 4-chord progression, you can also do different things with the other instruments in the song, or keep adding different layers that can complicate the emotion, give it a little bit more depth. There's a level at which it becomes too much, indistinguishable. But typically with just a few instruments, you can create enough of a sonic pastiche that it sounds really good, it occupies all the air, and it also strengthens the narrative at the core. And I think most people underestimate how many layers of instrumentation are in most especially popular music, where it sounds sure, a guitar, a drum, a bass, but it's actually 20 guitars, that have been layered over and finely tuned into one big thick guitar sound. If it's Weezer, it might even be hundreds of guitar tracks on some of their that Van Weezer album. But I believe it was famously 6 or 9 guitars variably or something on Bullet with Butterfly Wings, Smashing Pumpkins, I mean. So yeah, the production is a huge part of creating a sound. It's not just about making a melody. It's about how are you going to convey the emotion. So if that emotion requires like layers and layers and layers of very slightly different chords, or the same chords played with a different timbre, basically stuff just sounds different, like depending on what you play it on, you know, like sure, the melody might be the same, but my vocal cords sound different from someone else's vocal cords, which sound different from piano chords tuned into different ways, which sounds different from a guitar that you can put through a billion different filters or tunings, or, you know, you can do a lot to change how the melody sounds, but still while having the same melody. It's all about finding the sound that resonates with you and tells your story, you know? And most of the time, the sound of the storytelling is like the most particular to the individual and their taste. Like that is the one that comes the most from just like, this is what I've always liked. You know, if you grew up with dance music, or you grew up with pop punk, or you grew up with rap and hip hop, like, and that's just what comes naturally to you, you might be just as capable of writing songs in other venues, in other genres, but like it's just not as likely to happen with the same frequency as you doing something that, you know, you just always think that way. Like my brain will come up with like math prog all day long. I don't replicate it because it's not like a fun genre to even perform in my mind. I just think it just matches the way that my brain works. I have a lot of internal echolalia for Dillinger Escape Plan, and fucking the Number 12 Looks Like You, and like Sufjan Stevens and the Mars Volta, and like, you know, artsy King Crimson, like mathy, proggy, weird psychedelic bands. Like that kind of stuff just lives in my head rent free, and my brain will just do that to me, you know? And then like hip hop or pop are genres that like I enjoy them, and so I've kind of studied them and figured out how they work, and I can create good stuff in those genres. But it's not necessarily something that is like always happening to my brain. Rap more so as time has gone on and I've focused on it. It's like something I want to do well. The act of doing something versus like the imagination of it. I hopefully released this vlog after the one I did about like how creating something is always like a process of making a misconceived like non-reality real, like your imagination of something which never existed, like you're imagining that something would exist, and then you are just creating something based on the fact that you had imagined that something would exist, but you're not replicating the imagination because that wasn't a thing, you know, you're just inventing something. So yeah, when it comes to music, you are most likely going to just invent music inwardly as a matter of course if you have that type of internal echolalia, and you internalize sounds and you combine them in your mind. And it's the same kind of thing for like sound designers. You know, there's like, I'm hearing these birds out here, but I'm not very attuned to them. It's not the kind of thing I pick up on and store in my brain. I don't like memorize bird sounds, you know? So to me, it's always just, okay, there's birds, whatever, you know? Whereas I can hear certain instruments and then my brain will always be able to replicate that sound, but it just depends on what it picks up, you know? So I'm much more music and words focused, and like I have a lot more parrot sense for like things I hear people say, or things I hear on TV, or things that are said in a very exciting and particular way. You know, I just pick up on inflections, but I'm more attuned to speech. Whereas somebody who works in sound design probably like constantly notices people unzipping their pants or something, you know, like in every environment. So if they're really good at their job, I mean. And again, just because you do that naturally in your brain doesn't mean it translates to even wanting to do it as a career field. You know, like there's plenty of people who are just really good at stuff that they hate doing, and plenty of people who love doing things that they're just okay at. You know, I love rapping. I don't know if I would put myself on the same class of some of my favorite rappers. You know, there's plenty of rappers I'm better than, plenty of rappers who would think they're better than me, who I know I'm better than, but including mainstream ones, including famous ones, but there is still, I can visually see like a whole layer of like quite a number of rappers that I know are better than me, you know, that I'm good enough to recognize exactly why they're better than me in every facet, you know. So that's something where it's like, yeah, I can't say that I'm just naturally a genius at rap. I'm like somebody who practices to be pretty good at it. Whereas, you know, I would naturally be a genius at like just doing like Zach Hill in my brain if I wanted, but I don't want to play drums. Zach Hill looks like a really painful existence. All right, I got to shit. That's the end of this.
All right, shouts out to my members: Deep Talker, Water Fan, Ranila, Nathan Pugh, Rielian Friends, Super Chunk 121, Luna Lulu, Max Potion TCG, Isabel Incorporated, Zemq, Curbman, Crystalline Fos, Erratic Drop, Yakuman, Zydeas, Zinc, Radio Knights, Brianna W, Baba Gadusius, Petrichor VT, Pika Pika 2000, Sister of Scarlet, Kudere-kun, Mayday from Space, Spectral, The Mr. Grafixable, Oh My Guy, Yodiland Wizard, Commenter number 456, Spacey Filmer, Your Stuff is Cool, CC, Plague on Humanity, ASE Presents, Denacori, Brody, Z-Cypher, Gary Always, Gigadonk, Zerakiel, Zen Huxtable, Duncan264, Gassy Hall, Taperclip, and Night. Thank you all. Wow, we're up to 45. I was stuck at 40 for a hot minute there. Pretty excited to have you all here. So, yeah.